Good afternoon. Welcome back to another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. You are here for the transformational power of photography, photography as a tool for wellness, wisdom, and stress reduction. Live from Chris Orwig's palace in an unknown location. Chris, what's up, man?
Well, welcome everyone. I'm at a conference, as you can tell. I'm in this big conference room. I'm lighting myself with my iPhone, so we have a little more light on the face. But I mean, it's kind of funny how this is tied to it because a lot of it's about wellness, it's about stress reduction, it's about how photography teaches you to adapt and be adaptable. And here I am at this event. I was supposed to have this room, it wasn't ready, but it's like, you know what? We just figure something else out and we stay calm and we get the job done. So that's a lot of what this talk is about. So it's kind of fitting, of course.
Awesome. So we're adapting here. Of course, we want to thank Sony for hosting today's event and welcome all of you out there from the outer reaches of the internet. If you guys do have any
Yes.
questions, feel free to get them in, whether it's the comments section or if you're here on Zoom, you can use the Q&A module. But Chris, I'll turn it over to you and I'll see you in a little bit.
Okay, great. And I'm going to share my screen and jump into my slides and then just let's see. It looks like I need to have participant screen sharing. It just said I wasn't able to share the screen. Let me try that one more time. Or Derek, maybe you can change that setting. While that setting's being changed, this talk is really coming from a deep and soulful place, and I have some great content prepared. So hopefully it will be valuable for you. Okay, there we go. I'm almost ready, and we're just going to share the screen and go to full screen there, and voila, here we are. So this talk is about this whole idea of how photography can improve and enrich and enliven our lives. And so I'm going to tell some stories, share some ideas, and I hope that ultimately that this helps you in your own journey. And sometimes for me, when I'm on a journey, like I was on a surf trip down in Mexico, it was windy, so the surf wasn't good. We were all kind of frustrated and we couldn't figure out where we were going to camp. And so we just went for this little walk and then we found this swing. And I knew at this moment I had the wrong perspective, the wrong angle. I mean, photography teaches you a lot. You just need to change your perspective. So really it's the same moment. It's just, you want when the swing's fully extended, but I just needed to step 4 feet to my left. And what that does ultimately, I think, for us is it can bring us a sense of wellness, like, oh yeah, how amazing. Like, I'm so glad it's windy. I'm so glad we went on this walk. I'm so glad I had a camera. It gives you this wisdom to say, just keep looking, keep searching, and it puts you in a different state. And this is true, I think, whether we're photographing, I'll share some of my images, a surfer above the water or moments after that below, or we're on a trip and we want to convey the feeling that we have for the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I grew up not too far from there. Or we're in Italy, a different bridge. This is the Ponte Vecchio. Or flying in an airplane for the first time, capturing images with the windows open and capturing mountains, or out in a desert, or photographing an actress or strangers that we've just met and we're exploring how to make those connections with them. In all of these situations, what I found is that these ultimately can lead us to this moment where we realize what Mark Rabu once said, which is photography, it's savoring life intensely at 1/100th of a second. Somehow, when we have a camera, we get more out of life, even when we're stuck in a funny conference room like I am right now. It can remind us that there's more. There's more out there. Quick little intro on myself. I've written 7 books. The 3 most recent are here: People, Pictures, Creative Fight, and Authentic Portraits. I love writing. I love teaching. I'm a Sony Artisan of Imagery, along with a lot of amazing other photographers. So I'm an ambassador for the brand. I use a lot of different gear. This tends to be my go-to gear. Just want to highlight that just because I know that gear is always interesting. Like, what are we using to capture the images you're seeing? This is not a gear talk. This is more a soulful, life relevant talk, but I wanted to highlight that. And I also wanted to highlight kind of my credentials for giving this talk. I'm a photographer, author, and teacher, and my goal is really to live life to the fullest, help other people do the same. And that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. We all have tips of the iceberg. There's all this outward side that the world sees, but there's other sides too. One of the other sides for me is, for the last 30 years, I've wrestled with chronic pain. I've been to all kinds of medical institutions: Stanford, UCSF, UCLA, Mayo Clinic, runs the gamut. And throughout it all, I've explored how kind of modulate my pain, how to live with pain, how to deal with it in a creative and interesting way. And so that's part of my story, but we all have different stories, different roles that we play, and also different, there may be some noise in the background. Hopefully it's not too bad, but different roles. I'm a father, I'm a friend. We have pains of different types. We face challenges, difficulties, financial gain, financial loss, whatever it is. But all of that stuff, I've found that if we can bring photography into that, those things that aren't seen can almost act like, if you look at the iceberg picture there, like the keel of a sailboat. It anchors us, it deepens us, it allows us to get more out of life. I think so often we're focusing on what the world sees, but there's these other sides to it. And part of that I've found comes from bringing intention to photography. And when I think of intention, I think of this idea of, where are we at and what are we searching for? And let me dig into that in a deeper way. So where are we at? Are we in a moment of grief? Like I had a loss recently, a couple months ago, that I was experiencing, and maybe what I was searching for was a sense of peace. That's what I was really looking for. Or maybe where I'm at is I'm stressed and I'm looking for serenity, or maybe I'm just distracted and I want focus. But all of those things have the ability to really shape who we are and what we're doing. Derek, also just jump in if my background sound is too loud, if there's noise in the background that's distracting. Otherwise, I'll keep going. But I wanted to jump to this idea of intention and look at it from the perspective of things that we all do. Almost all humans, a large percentage of us, right? We cook and we capture images. We all have phones, and there's a camera on those phones. And let's talk about intention related to some things before photography. You can sit down to write a poem. You can sit down to write a work email, a children's story, a love letter, whatever it is. And that intention shapes the craft, shapes the activity. Same thing with cooking, right? So we could, I don't know, we could be cooking something for a school event or a quick snack or a backyard dinner. Or my mom, I remember she used to make chocolate chip cookies. She made those with this intention of love, and they tasted better. They tasted different. That intention really affects the end product and also the overall experience. So if we relate that to photography, we may find ourselves in a moment where we're stuck, or where we're discouraged, or for me, where I have a pain level that really increases and I'm having a really tough day. Now, with that, that's kind of where I'm at. And then I say, okay, well, what intention am I bringing to this? What am I searching for? Maybe I'm searching for a sense of peace or a sense of beauty, or maybe I'm just feeling really like I'm having a pity party. I'm sure, and we all have those, right? And what I really need instead is gratitude. The camera can help us become grateful. Or like, oh, wow, look at this little leaf or whatever it is. Now, suddenly it shifts the energy, and it becomes a tool for wellness, for wisdom, and even healing. And ultimately, I think the camera takes us on a journey. It gets us from being stuck and sitting and stagnant to walking down the road. I found the camera to be this incredible, almost passport to get out into the world. And it helps us to not necessarily just see new things, but see in new ways. And ultimately, photography teaches us a lot about creativity. And there's so many definitions about creativity, but one that I came across recently was this, that being creative is about approaching problems with positivity. It's about saying, hey, there's something going on. And problem, let's think of that in a neutral way. It's not like a big, it's like a problem is like, where should I go to dinner? Or what should I wear today? It's something where you're making a decision. There's some decisive moment and just saying, okay, let me be positive. Let me be creative. Let me see how I can even present in an empty conference center where I'm stuck right now because my hotel room isn't ready, even though I planned ahead, even though I did everything possible. It's like, let me just approach this with positivity. So in photography, sometimes that means storytelling. Like, how do I tell the story of this bride and this groom on the edge of this cliff in a really intimate and connected way, but also the sense of scale? the sense of awe, the sense of wonder. There they are on that cliff. It's, you know, the same moment, but it's just this different part of the story. And so as photographers, we're always thinking about, okay, how do I tell these stories? Or how do I tell the story of being in New York and just feeling like this, it's so dizzying, it's so overwhelming, I don't really fit in? Or how do we then walk in the streets and say, well, this is the fit I'm looking for? In this case, how do I have the subject fit in? Because I'm trying to figure out, how do I fit into all the chaos, all the noise, all the traffic, all the excitement? And other times, maybe the problem is you have a friend that doesn't want to be photographed. How do we get them at ease and create that image? Or someone who's awkward, how do we create a more awesome look? Or someone who's getting excited, it's their wedding day, but we want to just take a few steps over to the right and capture something that's more meaningful. How do we create photographs that are meaning? I mean, how do we go from snapshots to great shots to something even more? And I think a lot of this has to do with what we're capturing of others and also ourselves. How do I create a self-portrait when I'm camping in Joshua Tree that relates to where I'm at this time in life or at this time in life? And ultimately, all of this, I think, has taught me that creativity is this mixture of fight and flow. And what I mean by that is sometimes you're just fighting. Sometimes you're going against the odds. Sometimes you're caught up in the flow and everything is perfect and wonderful. And because I know that, because the camera has taught me that, when life feels like a fight, I'm like, okay, this too shall pass. When I'm in the flow, I'm like, all right, let's enjoy this while it's here, because this too shall pass. And there's this ebb and flow, and that's what makes it so interesting. And ultimately, I think photography has this ability to enrich and deepen our lives. It's not just about the images, it's about how it affects who we are, who we're becoming. And then Derek, again, jump in if we have any audio problems, any questions or anything like that. And this is leading up to this, which is, how has photography enriched your life? And Derek, I would love to ask you this question, because I think it's worth pausing for a moment for all of us to think about, okay, what has photography really brought to me and to my life? And if we can start to realize that, then it can become a bigger and better tool for wellness, wisdom, and stress reduction. So Derek, let me stop sharing. And let's see, how do I do that? Maybe just exit out of that, stop share. There we go. Derek, hit me. How funny is this, right? Of course, I'm in a conference room, but how has photography enriched your life?
Well, before I answer, I got to tell you that Luke, who's joining us on Vimeo, said not your usual Zen location. So you've
Yes.
already been pinned, as everyone knows when you're showing up on screen, we're expecting the Zen to come. So
Yes.
we're
It
gonna
can
get
come even here. It can come in the backyard cabin. It can come, comes wherever we are. But yeah, go for it.
definitely. How has photography enriched my life? I think it's connected me to everything around me.
Yeah.
Meaning the people close to me, things I love, even just my everyday stuff. It's connected me to it's made me be more connected to my surroundings and really appreciate everything more. I think over the pandemic, you saw places shutter that you never thought would shutter, places that are part of your routine. And I think that makes you more immersed in the everyday. You appreciate the everyday more. So I think that's it for photography. I never take anything for granted now.
Yes. Yes. I'm going to add to that too. That just made me think about, like, with pandemic and different challenges that we faced. And there's a tragedy that happened in our town, and I may relocate outside if the background starts getting loud here. But and it made me realize, and portraiture makes me realize, everyone has a story. You never know the story. Like in the pandemic, you never know if, like, someone, maybe it's really great for them because their business is booming. Like Zoom was founded in Santa Barbara, and so those people who own Zoom, they were crushing it. They still are, right? So for them, the pandemic was quote good, right? But then others, people experience great loss. You just never know the story. And so I think part of it for me is, like, when in doubt, just be kind to people, because we don't know what the heck's going on, and be grateful for what we have, because everything is up in the air, right? And it can change. And I think photography teaches us that, even from just like a broad sense, like seasons and light, right? You're like, wow, the light's amazing, then it's not. Or wow, this fall colors, they're amazing, then they're not. Or oh my gosh, this location is perfect. And then it's like, I was talking to a friend yesterday. He had this photograph from Cuba. It's one of his favorite photos ever. And it was this old painted rustic wall. And he went to go back to photograph it again years later with a better camera, and it had been painted over brown. And he was just like, oh, you never know, stuff changes, right? And I think the camera teaches us that if we're open to learning, or if we're saying like, what are you trying to teach me here, camera? What are you trying to teach me here? Um, Derek, what do you think? Should I take a little stroll outside, or should I keep going with our background? Or
Yeah, they're not too bad. I'll pop in and let you know if it becomes to where we can't hear. Zoom's noise suppression is actually pretty decent.
okay, and I'm getting close to my little mic here too, so hopefully that will help. But if they let me just look backwards. If they start really rocking and rolling and setting up this conference room, we'll go on a little walk. We'll do the world's first ever BH event space photo walk webinar on
on the go on Zoom.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to also turn off my light just for the sake of it. I don't think we need that anymore, even though that was fun. Let me jump back to my slides and share my screen here. And sorry, I'm just trying to get a sense. I think we're good. Let's share the screen. Let's keep digging into the topics. And here we are. So pausing to really answer that question for those of us listening, watching, and even ask friends, you ask other photographers, like, what do you get out of it? Because the reality is, I think there's so many things that it brings to us. Friendships, I know for me, is a huge one. Connection, community, meeting fascinating people, artists, athletes, authors, actors, yogis. I mean, you name it. And so it's really enriched my life in that way. All right. The next thing is exploring how we can gain wisdom from what we photograph, and beginning this process of getting really active in this, like saying, okay, well, what wisdom am I gaining? This is the guy, Jack O'Neill, who popularized the wetsuit. Some people say invented the wetsuit, which for surfers is a great thing. And for him, he was like, okay, cold water isn't good. How do I solve that? And he invented the wetsuit. There are other people, surfers, who they're constantly asking themselves, like, okay, well, I want to ride storms. How do I do that more effectively? And that's really what they're exploring, how they can do in those ways. And I love that. And you learn from that, or learn from someone like this, a world champion surfer. He's very successful. He's won 11 world titles. And you realize that success is a problem. You have to explore how to handle it. And there's ways to handle it poorly, and there's ways to handle it artistically. And the reason I'm kind of highlighting this with these words on these images is that what they do for us is, or what our photographs have the potential to do for us, is to teach us something we might not have realized, or we might not have learned. And I think, Derek, unless you jump in and say, don't, I'm gonna walk outside here with my laptop for a second, and I'm gonna find better space just so I can be a little bit more in the zone. And so we're gonna go for a walk. But I think when you this is so funny that we're doing this webinar and walking, but let's try it, because I have the sense that these guys are gonna start building out this room, and I need to exit. So we're gonna make that happen. And we're just going to go to the lobby here, and in the lobby I'll find a nice happy spot to continue our conversation. But when we're hanging out with people like that, I think part of that is, and Derek, just let me know if inside's better than outside too, we learn something. Or photographing a famous singer-songwriter, and he's trying to convey some kind of inner truth through music. And how do you do that? And what does that look like? And what I'm going to do, I think I might just turn off my monitor, or my screen, just for a moment. Let me see if I can do that. I don't know if I can. Well, I'll just live with it, because I'm balancing my laptop on my knee here. It's so funny. The problem of acting authentically. When you're around really good actors, it's asking that question. Okay, great. And is this outside better, or should I go back inside?
Yeah, this sounds good.
Okay, great. When you're working with really amazing actors, they're trying to act in a really authentic and true to self way. And when you're around someone like that, you're actually learning about, okay, well, what does it mean to perform but do so authentically? Or in you realize the problem is turning emotion into paint. How do they do that? How do they translate that? And that then informs, how do I turn emotion into pixels, into something digital, right? or photograph a friend who's going on an expedition. How do you cross Iceland on a bike? How do you do that? And what's the gear involved? And what's the ingenuity and the grit that you need to do that? And long story short, it's this idea that we can gain some wisdom, which really is deep insight and understanding that we gain through experience. And as photographers, we're actually gaining like a plus factor of wisdom because we're around these people, we're learning from these people or these places, these landscapes, whatever it is, through the experiences that we're having and through the focus that our cameras are giving us. And that could be true photographing a wolf too. You know, you kind of realize to see and be seen, we have to be wild, brave, and calm, but we have to be true to ourselves. We have to find this. Or photographing a poet that teaches you this deep lesson about self-love. I'll read his words. He says, self-love is a sincere acceptance of the past, an agreement to make the most of the present, and a willingness to allow the best to occur in the future. And I love that. And when you spend time with a poet, when you photograph a poet, what they write about rings in a way that's different had you just read their work. It also gives us a sense of wonder and awe and looking at the world in a new way. And what that can mean for us is sometimes we look at something like a bridge, like in this case, this is the Golden Gate Bridge. I've seen this so many different times, and suddenly we're seeing it in a new and a different way. And that can help us to kind of step back and say, like, what is this bridge? And how is this bridge interesting? And why is this bridge interesting? And what about it is something that I want to really lean into and explore and look at? And in this case, and I'm just moving because I think I found a little quiet spot. You guys, I'm so fired up about this. So I think we're good to go. In this case, it's about focusing on the wave in the foreground and not the bridge. And for me, I think what that helped me do was just say, like, hey, you know what? It's not always about, it's not always about the lead subject in the scene. Like, don't forget to like notice where you're standing. And it gives you that sense of story, wisdom, wonder, awe. And there's always more than it seems. And this is true when you're photographing strangers, people you don't know. At an event. These were both at events. These were both just on the streets, one of them in Los Angeles, one of them in New York. And it gives us the ability to cultivate focus. I love this T.S. Eliot quote. He said, we are distracted by distractions from distractions. And this camera somehow allows us to tune out all this distracting noise and to really focus in. And to really have, like in this case, for me, this image is so quiet, almost as just like this spacious silence. And it was really noisy, and there was construction behind me, and the waves were breaking, and there was wind. But when you hold the camera up, suddenly you enter a different headspace, and it allows you to cultivate that inner silence in a different way and helps you to become curious. This is downtown LA. I saw these two buildings. I'm like, wow, they're kind of close to each other. I wonder what that would look like from underneath. So I just walked in between the two buildings and pointed my iPhone up, right? And the camera constantly gives us these rewards, whatever cameras we're using, it doesn't matter. But it's like, okay, Chris, continue to be curious, continue to follow those threads, continue to look. And here's another situation. I was biking to the top of the mountains behind where I live, and I saw this little piano, and I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta walk over there. So I walked over there and I took a picture, and I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. But then I realized, okay, Chris, do the work of a photographer. So then I kind of like tried a different angle. That didn't work because you kind of can't tell. It just looks like a piano and a dirt lot, but really we're in the top of the mountains. So I had to climb up on this rock, point my camera down a little bit. And then I think I used Lightroom to add a little bit more light on the piano to do that. And the point is that seeing something off in the far distance, whether it's a building or a piano or whatever it is, it's like we've learned as photographers, get curious, cultivate curiosity. Now, how that leads to life or even presenting this content is, for me, it was like, okay, I'm really stuck without a place to present in. Let's get curious. What are some options? Rather than shutting down, opening up and just exploring what we can do. Sometimes this means changing our perspective, shooting something in a way that's front lit or shooting it backlit. Same moment. I'm just 10 feet in a different spot, same beach, same spot, very different things. Or in this case, in an abandoned bank in New York, this is front lit, and then walked around the backside, this is backlit. And changing our perspective, I mean, if we just go back through those, it's like there's such a different narrative and story. And so often we hear about people who are kind of stuck with one political point of view or some belief or something. But photographers, we're cultivating this openness, this ability to engage in the world and just say, like, well, what if I know I've always looked at it this way, but what if I just try looking at something this way rather than straight on? What if I come in at a different angle? And again, this was straightforward because I was so excited, like, oh my gosh, this is, how cool is this thing? Snap. And that's never the good image for me. Usually I have to be like, okay, walk around to the other side, like we talked about in the beginning. And that change of perspective, that actually gives you an edge that the rest of the world doesn't have if you're willing to do the work of a photographer. The rest of the world is like, something cool, snap. What we have to do is say something cool, something interesting. Then we get curious, we do that work. And suddenly that can change, literally change who we are and how we live. And it is especially helpful if we're dealing with really difficult stuff. And so for me, I mentioned some of my story of chronic pain, but I'm constantly having to use this technique to deal with that. And I love how Picasso put it. He said, if I don't have red, I use blue. In other words, get over it. Like, okay, if this angle doesn't work, try the other angle. Or it's like, for me, there's times where I have certain limitation. Like, okay, I can't, like right now, I can't ride my bike. Well, I can swim. So that's like, if I can't ride my bike, I can swim. If I can't use red, I use blue, right? We are cultivating this creative muscle, which is desperately what the world needs and what we need in order to get more out of life, to deepen life's experience, and to savor life. Here, in this case, on the left, I was stuck waiting for my daughter at carpool pickup. So I took a picture of the window. On the right, I was waiting in an office building in LA for a meeting, and I looked down at the parking lot and I loved the light and the shadows. And I just thought it was so strangely beautiful. And everyone else was so upset and angry and all this stuff because the meeting was late, and they were late. So our meeting was late, and everyone was, and I'm like, you know what? I'm walking away from this. I'm going to find a way to savor this moment. The camera can help us to do that. This is walking around LA after that time and just looking around, just look up, look down, see what you find. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there. And then, of course, bringing the camera with you throughout life, photographing friends that you meet. And I'm a dad. I have 3 daughters, so photographing family and kids and just savoring that because it's so fun how they grow up and how they're so expressive and crazy and weird and wild and interesting. Sometimes it means when you're in Florence in Italy and you just see big landscape or big, beautiful architecture, or you see something small on the side of the road and you pull over, you're kind of, it's savoring, I think, is the best word, because you are saying, like, the rest of the world's like, wow, cool farmhouse. But no, you pull over because of the camera. You stop, you walk around, you think about the color yellow, you think about the plants, you think about the bricks, you think about the old door, you notice all these little details. And you think about, at least for me, I think about patina and the passage of time and how some buildings look better with the passage of time, some look worse. I want to be someone that looks better as time goes by. Other times, maybe it helps you to think like a poet. So you reduce and simplify, not to say less. You're not minimalistic, but you really want to say more. So maybe someone's on this journey and has been through hardship, and you want to capture that. And the up look isn't just a cute pose, but it's like, it is there's a deep story behind the photograph on the right. It's not my privilege to share that because it's not my story, but poetically it's there. Sometimes it's, again, top of the mountains, and you just want to take a picture to show the feeling of these colors that are just otherworldly, that happen when the fog comes in and right before dawn, and the way the camera records those. Or other times it's like this image. I could sum up my childhood with this photograph. I could just add my childhood. Here it is right there. It's that one tree in my backyard, and the tree I grew up climbing in the hills behind my house in Northern California. And that's that reduction, that simplification, but it also says so much. And I'm so grateful that I have this picture. This tree is still standing, but oak trees they tend to grow really big, and eventually they fall in such a drastic way. And so I'm glad I have it while the tree's still standing. And it's a way, it's a poem that is a hat tip to my childhood. All of this ultimately can lead to this sense of wellness, which I think of as this inner state of being. I once heard someone say that wellness is how well you make other people feel when you enter the room. If we are doing well inside, then it's almost like that energy is shared with others. And what I've found is photography has given me the capability to do so many things. When I feel distant and detached, it helps me to feel close and connected to landscape, to an object, to a person. When I'm negative and critical, it helps me be like, you know what? Let me look for the light. There's light somewhere. I got to find it. When I'm anxious and stressed out, it gives me a sense of calm and peace and so many other things, as you can see that I've listed here. I'll just click through all of these things. But maybe one of them that I mentioned earlier was grief. We had this, it's a long story and I won't get into it, but we had this deep loss in our family, and I was really grieving. And grief requires space and time. And in the beginning stages, I wasn't ready to be grateful really for anything. But eventually, when I got my camera out, it helped me to find gratitude and to kind of counterbalance all of this difficult stuff. And I think lists like this could be helpful to create. Even like number 3 up there, I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but feeling insignificant. So often I'm like, why am I here? Like, am I adding any value? And you could say, no, I am. Okay, I can bring value. I can be useful. I can document. I can capture. I can convey. I can share. And the camera can do all these crazy things for us. And I think a lot of this goes back to that idea I said in the beginning of intention. Remember, I talked about writing or cooking or photography, and that intention has this ability to change what we're doing, change and shape what we're doing. And I love how the Greek philosopher said, he said, you know what? You become what you give attention to. And I think if we have intention and attention, it can lead to change. So if I have intention to really, this was outside of our kitchen, monarch had a cocoon. So I was watching it, and I had this intention I wanted to see the caterpillar turn into a butterfly. I was so intent on that, just learning from that. And I was paying attention. And then when it came out, it was just so beautiful. That then changes you. You think about your own metamorphosis. Or I'm walking on a beach and I see all these rocks and just think about, okay, how is it that these are so impossibly smooth? And you realize that the rocks further up the hill or further up the beach, they aren't smooth because they haven't gone through the process of being washed by the waves back and forth and going through all that challenge and stuff. But that challenge, if you can embrace it, can lead to something beautiful. Or you're photographing someone who's one of the fastest cyclists in the world in a wind tunnel. This was a number of years back, Ivan Basso. But I'm so intent on like, what's the wisdom here? And it's like all the small adjustments can make so much difference in the world. I would see everyone come in. There's other photos, like 8 people surrounding this. And it's like they were all collaborating together to find out how they could make small adjustments. Because sometimes I think in big, broad brushstrokes, and this helped me remember, no, Chris, go small. Or sometimes it's like, you know what? You want to get out and feel that sense of smallness and that sense of awe and wonder and scale. And it puts things into perspective. You think your problems are big, just go walk in the wilderness. And this was a snow camping trip. Or be around people who just have this inner sense of stability and balance. And you can feel that. Maybe it's very intentional, like the yoga teacher on the left, or maybe it's this little kid. She was just hiding. This is one of my daughter's best friends, little Emmy. She's such a sweetheart, but she was just sort of hiding in this little nook. And she just tends to find these little nooks, and it's her personality. And I'm like, yeah, nooks, those are good things, like reading nooks. Or maybe I need to go like find my own little nook. Maybe I'm just moving too fast and I need to slow down, and maybe I need to smile. And so again, as I'm paying attention with intention to these people, they're affecting me. And so we have to start becoming really mindful about what we're photographing. And we're not just photographing someone newly engaged, we're photographing love. What is love? Why does it matter? And who are we? This kind of love. Oh, I love this picture. This was a friend of ours. I took senior photos of her, and she said, can we do one with my dog? And I said, of course. And I just love their connection. And her dog has since passed away, and she has her dog's name tattooed on her arm. I mean, you can just feel that love in the picture, and it reminds you of what matters. And sometimes it's photographing a family and it's being calm, or it's being silly and jumping up in the air, or it's going to a carnival and seeing people swing around and kind of make you think like, what am I doing swinging around and around and around? Maybe I need to get off this ride and change things up a little bit. And you get to those little tidbits of wisdom from your pictures, I think, when you bring intention, attention, and that depth. And so I'm almost at the end of my slides, and then I want to do a little conversation here. But the thing I encourage you to think about is to begin to ask yourself, what are you really searching for when you pick up your camera? This was a picture of Lake Tahoe, which I love. I grew up going there as a kid. My family had a cabin there. It's this little mountain area, beautiful lake. When I went out that morning, I really was like, what am I looking for? Why am I photographing a lake? Well, lakes are cool. They're beautiful, but why? It was like, what was I really, really looking for there? And then bring that authenticity, that intention, that attention, that depth to what you're doing. Like, really be present. Too many of us are like, wow, cool lake, snap, or wow, cool, thanks, cool, picture, picture. We're like the dog and squirrels, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. But if we can bring something more, it has the ability to change us. And if you start to realize that, because I've worked with thousands of students, I've seen how the work that they chase affects who they are, who they hang out with, and who they become. If we start to really think about that and start to say, you know what, I want to start to photograph things with this different degree of intentionality, and realize that this is actually changing and shaping who I am becoming as a human. Because here's the trick. Taking better photographs isn't about the photographs. It's not about getting better at photography. It's about getting better at life. And the better you get at life, then the better your photographs become. And so there's this interplay, there's this paradox, there's this connection. And if we can embrace that, fireworks. I mean, it can really help you launch your career if that's the goal. It can also help you just live a better life. It can help your relationship, can help kind of everything. So this is where we're going to jump out of the slides for a moment here and just talk about some next steps. What are some questions maybe people are having? What are some next steps? And let me go ahead and exit out of my slides. Let me stop sharing. And Derek, if you can turn back on a camera, that would be great. And then if you have any comments or questions or thoughts, let's do them. And let me turn on my video. We can turn on mine. Let's see, or maybe you can start mine. You'll find that I am in another conference room.
I don't think I can get yours started. Are you able to get it started there, Chris?
Let me click on start. It says you can't start your video because the host, my good buddy Derek, has stopped it. And if we can't get it, we can just look at my picture. But
gotta love it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna request to start video there. Give it just a second.
Okay, start my video. There we go. Here we are.
Oh, where is he going to be?
Conference room 2.
Nice.
And they're having some kind of event here, but no one was in here, so it was quiet and it was good. And talk to me. Any questions, or I want to talk about some next steps too, but what's coming to mind, Eric?
Yeah, let's see. We had something in from Luke here. Let me see this.
Yeah.
It's all right. So Luke says, I love hiking, being out and away in nature. I decided to start a practice of taking my camera and getting lost in the flow, taking pictures versus using my phone, and realized not having situational awareness in my environment becomes distracting.
Okay, so let me try to deconstruct that. Started to practice taking my camera, get lost in the flow. And so he's not really aware of what's happening. Becomes, look, maybe hit me more with what you're getting at. Like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I mean, I think getting lost in the flow is beautiful. I love that. I mean, that happens to me all the time when I am shooting. I could see, maybe you're saying that could be problematic because sometimes you need to be aware, like, I mean, I think this happens to people, sadly, a lot. They're by a river or something and they are taking a picture and they fall in the river or something, or, or whatever. You sprain your ankle on a rock because you're not paying attention to it. So I think obviously what I'm trying to say is be deeply connected to what's happening, and be in the moment, and don't be so in the moment that you're like not in life. Ultimately, I think that's dangerous. And I see a lot of that happening a lot. Like I remember when I was new to photography, I saw these lifestyle photographers and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. They must live the best lives. But then I met some of them and I were like, oh, their lives are horrible, but they're photographing really good life. And I was like, what a weird paradox, right? And they were so stressed out. And so, and it was just a couple of people I had met. What I realized was, no, I'm not gonna photograph something that isn't true to me. So, maybe let's say, well, lifestyle photography, let's say it's like people having a good time in nature. I'm not going to photograph that and then have a bad time in nature. I'm going to make sure I'm going to learn from what I think a good time is, and I'm going to make that real in my life. Does that make sense? Is that fair?
Totally. Yeah. Totally. Now we had a question come in. And I actually love this question from Sally on Vimeo. I tend to get into that Zen moment when I'm out on the beach with my camera. So then I get stuck on editing my story. Any ideas?
Yeah. I mean, one is I always tell myself the experience of photographing is different than the photographs, right? Because you're there, there's texture, there's sight, there's sound, there's wind, there's temperature, all these, things. So I try to give myself some space, because what happens to me if I edit the photos too soon, doesn't matter what it is, at the carnival, at New York City, at of a rock, of a building, if I edit or even look at them too soon, it's a letdown. So I let a little bit of time pass. It's the same thing that happens when you discover an old photograph from 5 years ago. You're like, oh my gosh, that is so amazing. But you can't let 5 years pass, but let, a couple of days or a couple hours, and then kind of listen to the photographs and say, what's the story, not of my experience, but what's the story within the frame? And that's a different thing. Like let's say the LA one of the, the buildings are kind of leaning to each other, and then I went underneath them. The story for me, like in the picture, was about symmetry. But the story of my experience was curiosity. And I could tell the curiosity story because I'm like teaching right now, but I would never show the first image, and if I was like telling the photo story, people would be like, why, what, they wouldn't even know what that meant. Or the other images maybe I took as I was walking over there. So the image story, and maybe I think I did share that photo because I just thought it was so beautiful, and the symmetry and how people can build these big, huge things and they can still be symmetrical. And so that was the story within the image. So anyway, Sally, what I would say is add a little bit of space and then kind of ask the photos, like, what story do you want to tell? Maybe that sounds a little woo-woo or a little out there, but because they do have something they want to tell. And I even ask, like, also, what wisdom are you trying to tell me? What's the message here for me? Because if I can clue into that, there's a greater chance there's a message for someone else. And this is the same thing true with music. Like if you make music really personal, then the song translates to millions, right? And I know this from singer-songwriters I've talked with. But if they're just like, I'll write a generic song, about like love. Love is great. Love is hard. Love is everything. It's like a horrible song. But if they write about someone they love or they lost, then instantly it's like it blows up. So
have you ever, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I found has helped me enjoy photography more, especially, I read it when I read the line, get stuck on editing my story from Sally. I thought, how many times do I dread editing? Do I dread uploading images, organizing them, processing them? Then that's how you have to sit there. One of the things that's helped me be not only be in the moment more, but enjoy the moment more and enjoy not having anything hanging over my head is going back to just shooting JPEGs. Now, I don't do it all the time.
Interesting. I know you've mentioned that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have had this conversation, especially when, we've talked in depth a lot about, like how using a camera versus a phone helps keep you in the moment and you're not distracted by the other stuff in there. And for me, I stress myself out sometimes thinking about the processing, and I won't want to take images because it's like, I don't want to go through and edit, and there's all these organized. So by shooting just JPEG and really just having like a film mentality where I'm just going to drop my roll of film off, I'm going to get it back, and I might, straighten something out a little bit, maybe a little minor correction if it needs something. But for the most part, I'm just ripping and running. And I found that helps keep me, I enjoy the moment more. I enjoy photography more when I don't necessarily associate it as work. Now, obviously, there's a line. If I'm doing a professional commercial job, you're going to shoot in RAW. You want that latitude there to make corrections if you need. But for the most part, for my own personal shooting, it's 99% JPEG.
Yeah, well, I like that, and I'm just going to broaden it, which is, creativity likes to sprawl. So creativity without limits just turns into a big blob. It's just like goes everywhere. It's like the person who is like, the new photographer, shoot everything under the sun. You shoot the tree, you shoot the cat, you shoot the dog, you shoot the rock, shoot the hubcap, you shoot the bird nest, you shoot the bird that fell out of the nest. You know what I mean? It's just like craziness. But when we get good at creativity is when we start limiting. And that's like, we need that funnel as creative beings. And so finding ways to impose limits, whether it is like, hey, the next week, JPEGs, or like, I'll shoot a commercial shoot, JPEGs. Oh, that would be like a crazy limit. Or I think I've talked about this before, like tape down the controls on your camera, take down the focus settings. So you can't do a focus ring. So you have to move, it's kind of like doing macro photography, but on larger scale, or go on a trip with only one lens, or shoot something you really love with only your phone. You'll learn how to use your phone really well, right? Like go to some epic location, and rather than bringing all your big gear and all your everything, just bring the phone, and it will force you because you'll love it so much. So the whole point is yes, to grow creatively, we need to impose limits. And the trouble with digital is we have none. And that can create problems for us. So if we're feeling the burden, like you were saying, in post-production, maybe what you need to do, like if I was your mentor and coach, I would be like, yeah, bro, like shoot JPEG. But then now I also want you to go, I want you to go somewhere and do a 2-hour shoot, but 5 images. That's it. Like, I want you to push the shutter 5 times. And you would be like, okay, Chris, do that. And, and you could do one for me, because I think we're kind of mentors, friends for each other in that way. So it's not ever that someone's in photography, it's a level playing field. So it's not about that, but it's about helping each other explore the value of limit. That is the sweet spot. And I would say the same thing is true when it comes to savoring life intensely. So here I'm at a conference. If this conference table had 600 pieces of chocolate on it, the way to enjoy the chocolate, and let's say it was really, really high-end dark chocolate, would be to just pick up one and just eat the one. If we ate 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, it just becomes dumb at that point. We've lost the value of it. So often in photography, we are over consuming, we're over capturing, we're over creating, and then we're creating issues for ourselves on the post-production. Let's say with eating too much chocolate, you're like, oh, my stomach didn't feel great. Like, I should have just stopped after like one of those little special dark chocolates. Bad analogy, but I think we get the idea. So I love that you said the JPEG idea. That's fun, but I would broaden that to other things and explore what that means. Even like, I have these students at my workshops, they'll have like 2 camera bags, and I'm like, okay, just bring 1 camera bag, or just bring a shoulder bag, or just bring 1 card, 1 battery, 1 lens. And they're just like, and I'm like, okay, that's a challenge for you. Because if you're resisting to it, that means that's going to be a great way to grow and be present. And then to tie it back into Luke too, he was saying, when he's out there, his question was about, he gets lost in the moment and someone spooks him by walking up, maybe go with a friend. Yeah, I would say that, or maybe like get lost in the moment and then just build in like, hey, every 15 minutes, like, let me set my camera down and just reestablish situational awareness, and let me just not take a picture and watch the birds fly. And I think we could all benefit from that. Like, we get so zeroed in with our cameras that the situational awareness, maybe it's not someone's spookiness, but it's like, well, what else is here? Like, what else is in the moment? So I think that was a good question. I'm going to hit I see a couple other questions. The dog and the squirrel, David said that was cool. Enjoying the moment. I love that. Someone else said that I think their spouse or someone does some like forest therapy. That's so cool. Forest bathing, photography workshop to get people to slow down. Oh man, I think that would be amazing to combine kind of wellness and wisdom and stress reduction into photography. I think, which would be funny, I try to do this in my workshops. I have another one in March if anyone's interested. But what people say is they thought they were coming for the photography, but they come out of those workshops like with their stress gone, better humans, deeper connections with others, all this other side benefit. And I think if you have that intent, it can happen. If the intent is like, I got to nail the shot at whatever cost, then you get a different reward from that. And then let me hit David. He said, I get overwhelmed with all the ways and things needed to accomplish this. I just put it off. How can I get focused and past this problem? So this is a problem of being overwhelmed, maybe with options. I just would say start simple. So I'm going to go to poetry, which is like write one line, or if it's like, oh, I get overwhelmed with, I don't know what the overwhelmed is, David, but I'll make it up for me, which is like New York is overwhelming to me, but I love New York. So what I do is I just start small. I find one person and I connect with that person. I photograph them. Then it leads me to another. And then it leads me to something else. And then I kind of find my rhythm and flow and I'm sort of grounded and then I'm like on fire. But I found that if I go in too fast, I'm almost like just too sensory overload. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's amazing. I don't even know what to do or where to go. So start small. I don't know, Derek, you might add to that, but I find that's a great creative starting point.
Simple, small things.
Yeah.
Things you love. It's going back to, the question you had for me earlier. And when I said, the things that I engage in with photography and what photography is done to help me appreciate the thing is it's easiest. We know it. I think sometimes we set too many parameters. And going back to your table full of chocolate analogy and me, dreading a shoot before I have a shoot is stop right there. Don't think. Why stress something that hasn't happened? I think.
And even like I would say, like bring gratitude into it. Again, this is just me jumping in. Sorry, but because I stress out about shoots every time I shoot. But like, and I have one coming up. I'm going to Costa Rica. That's going to be a big one. I have another one for Ghirardelli, but so a chocolate one, so I'm thinking about chocolate probably, but just saying like, okay, Chris, just be grateful that you get to do this. It's like, of course. Oh yeah, of course. And remember that like along the way, you're going to even have more reason to be grateful because for me, the camera is almost like this gratitude machine, right? Like even stressful shoots and you're just like, oh my gosh, wow, this is so amazing. I can't believe it. Look at that. Oh, look, and you're just like suddenly like lost in these beautiful moments. Or the camera gets you up early or gets you out to sunrise or gets you these places and or even affords you to be there in the first place. It's like that's where that first slide, the journey slide was for me. I was trying to think about how the camera is this passport. It's this excuse. It's almost like if you have a dog, which I do. Like I had a dog, dinner was over, dishes were done, and I took our dog for a walk around the block and it was night and the stars were out. And it was like, well, because I have a dog, I took a walk. I wouldn't have taken the walk. I would have like checked my email probably. And the camera's like that as well. It kind of forces us to take these walks, to get out into the world in different ways. It invites us, it asks us. That's why I like to have my cameras visible. If I see it sitting there, it's like, it's similar to my dog saying like, hey, I'm ready to go. Are we going? Come on, let's go. And that's, I don't know, one of the things I love. But anyway, you were saying about stressing out about a shoot, finding gratitude. I jumped on that because that's a big one for me. But did you have more to say about it?
No, I love that. You have to find gratitude. You have to look at the positive. I was just thinking, so I deactivated my Instagram. I post occasionally on Twitter because it's really about, protecting your mental health, protecting your creativity. And I think there's so much negativity out there. Don't contribute to it. There's so much positive out there that you can gain from photography. And I think so many people focus on aspects that don't really enrich. It's like the appetizer versus the meal. We talk about getting attention and people are focused on a brand ambassadorship and sponsorships and getting followers and getting likes. And when you turn around, you don't want to look 30 years from now and say, hey, I spent my entire life just trying to take pictures that other people liked. And now I have a body of work that I don't even like, and it doesn't mean anything to me.
Right, right. Or worse, maybe I'm a person who's kind of agitated and grumbly and, complaining about how the algorithm changed. I mean, think of how 20 years from now we're going to laugh. Like, remember people are like the algorithm, ha ha, or whatever. Or, I love surfing, and surfing has gotten more popular since COVID. And it's just as the world gets bigger, and more people are interested in it. And there's always people who all they talk about is like, oh, it used to never be crowded like this, and oh, this is horrible, and they're just negative, negative, negative. And I'm always like, hey, look, it is what it is. Like, you can stop surfing at this spot or in this way, or just let it be. And I think like anytime creativity, art, photography, whatever it is, starts to kind of have a negative effect, or if we're looking at social media too much, it's like, cut it out. Like, this is about living well. I mean, what is life if not that? I mean, I think COVID, if anything, it taught us that, like, life's short. Let's do it right. Let's do what matters, and let's pay attention. Like you said, like maybe, the social thing, it was like it's time to just take a little break from it. And that's fine. And that's what any like wellness guru would tell you. They would say like, if you or any like physical therapist, if you're like running and you have shin splints or something, they're like, hey, you're putting in too many miles, like take a week off. It's like, you can do that. It's fine. It's good, because then that week will give you a whole year of running. Or maybe you're just going to keep running, then you're going to have stress fracture, and then you're going to have to take 2 years off, and then you're going to be frustrated, and then you're going to get out, you're not going to be fit, and just the snowball stuff. So what I'm trying to encourage people to do is to pay attention and to add intention. And what I've found in my own life is it's really helped me. And like I said, I mean, I could get into the gory details at some point, but I have all these health issues, but photography has helped me to thrive. Like, I thrive as a human being. And I was kind of thinking about like, how is that possible? And I think one of the big reasons is because of the camera, because of what it's taught me, the people I've met along the way. Because also what happens when you have problems, you meet people with bigger problems, and that puts your problems into context, and you're like, oh, okay, Chris, you don't need to complain about that. Or even like my mom, she's had breast cancer, skin cancer, colon cancer, and I have this great portrait of her that I love, and she's smiling so big and she's radiant. And I'm like, okay, if my mom can be radiant with all that she's gone through, I can at least stop frowning, and the camera helps you realize that. So,
and I think that's a beautiful thing, going back to the power of the camera is these people that we love, these people that we meet, it could be someone that we share 5 minutes with. You ever connect with somebody and you're just like, wow, like,
yeah,
I barely know this person, but I feel more connected to them than people I've known my whole life. Or, I'll tell you a quick little story here is I've had, I think it's about 6 or 7 people now that I've stopped on the street and taken photos of that passed away within a year or two.
wow.
And so for a time, it was like, am I cursed? What is going on here? And I look back at it and it's like, again, perspective, right? Looking at things with a different perspective.
Right.
Okay, now I'm going to look at it this way, that I had the pleasure of our paths crossing and I was able to capture that person. And how many times do we talk about how deep a connection is in a portrait, that you're taking a piece of somebody, you're freezing the essence of that person. And the fact that I was able to capture these people, and the crazy thing is that, these weren't people that were in their last years of life. This was young people, freak accidents. And, through the beauty of social media, so I had to spin it around, through the beauty of social media is why I was able to remain in contact with them and find out about their passing. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, man, like, life is precious. We have the power to capture it and to do it in a way that, like through watching your workshops, and you do it so well, is showing us how to connect to people, how to get people comfortable, how to capture an authentic portrait of somebody. Every time we have you on, it's like we're getting not just photography, we're getting life and photography. And it's all up to us if we use that to do good. It's like a cartoon. Are you going to use the power to do good? Or are you going to use the power to do evil? You've given us the pieces. Now it's up to us to take it out there and to put good into the world and to introduce art that's meaningful, that's intentional. I love how you just said, about talking about paying attention and having intent.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, back to that story of years of photographing people and who've passed. And I always think the biggest gift we can give someone who's passed is to live well, right? I mean, because that's what they would want us to do. There's always stories, and I have specific stories of someone's like, my dad always wanted me to do this. He passed away, and so now I'm doing that thing, or whatever. Or remembering someone the way we remember them. I think the best remembrance isn't a statue, but it's like how we're living with them. Let's just say, like I'll tell one quick story, and I know we got to wrap up soon, but my mother-in-law was dearly close to, she passed away way too young. And every day, on the day she passed, we have ice cream for breakfast. And we have that because she was once on a cruise with one of our daughters, and she was kind of babysitting our daughter, and she took her to ice cream for breakfast. It became kind of this legend, and she was like, well, if I'm watching your kids, I can do whatever I want. And it was just this funny, beautiful moment. And she was this funny, beautiful, wonderful person. And so we live with that in mind. We remember that act and also all of the rest of her kindness. And so the way we remember people is, I think, is who we are, who we become, how we live. And like you said, we do have the power with photography. It's a really powerful medium. Everyone's doing it right, and it's all this kind of stuff, but that doesn't matter. And I love that Shakespeare line where he said, nothing is or isn't, but thinking makes it so. And so how we think about photography is really what it becomes. And if we can bring and I'm not saying we have to totally go into this all in, but sometimes just bring a slight dash of this into the mix, it can change everything. And it can change us from being like, oh, I'm missing out, or to, oh, wow, I'm so grateful I'm here. It can change it from being, oh, wow, okay, maybe the universe was teaching you like, hey, just cherish life, man. Like, remember, like this, there's no guarantee anywhere. Cherish life. I mean, that's what loss does. It makes you realize it's way too short. It's way too wonderful to waste. So let's make the most of it. And maybe the little switch is just, okay, what is this trying to teach me here? Even like the carnival that comes to town and people are on that swing, and I was standing there, I'm like, I love those things, but I'm like, what is this? And it's like, it's this passive ride where people are just kind of lolling around the circle and circle again. And it's a great ride. I love the ride. But I think what the universe was trying to get at with me was like, there's certain couple things in my life I was just sort of like repetitively doing. And I was like, get off the ride, Chris. Like, come on. There's like, go on the Big Dipper, whatever, go do something else. Go get some cotton candy. Go do anything, And I was stuck in a rut, and it was like a fine rut. But I think, the way we evolve and grow is we're willing to change. And we've all seen people who've hung on to something good too long. I mean, the classic scenario is like your friend from high school who's the sports star, and it's like 30 years later and they're still reliving that. And you're like, bro, that was cool then, but let's let it go. Let's get off that merry-go-round. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I would love to introduce a challenge out there to all of you who are watching and listening. Shoot intentional. Take those photos that they may not be a magazine cover image, or they may not be something that anyone is going to message you to buy and hang up on their wall, but they're meaningful. And I promise you that down the road, they're going to make that moment stand out so much more in your mind. Be intentional. And the easiest way to be intentional is to take photos of what you love. I can't say it enough.
Yeah. And I would say, I'm just going to add to that because I love this. Be intentional, and then ask the question inside rather than just let the outside stuff, rather than being the dog with the squirrel. Go inside and just say like, okay, what do I need right now? Where am I at? Like, what's my status? How am I doing? And it's like, well, my stress level is this, or I'm happy, or I'm sad, or I'm lonely. Because there's times where I'll feel really lonely, and I'm like, well, what is that? Like, there's times where solitude slips into loneliness. I don't know if this has ever happened to anyone, but solitude you love. I'm like, oh, I love this. This is my creative like wellspring of everything. But then I'm like, I'm lonely, huh? And then I'll go out and I'll just shoot with that in mind, or capture images. And it's just, all it is just like reconnecting with something that's happening And then I remember one time this happened, and I think I was feeling lonely, and I was taking these pictures of these people, the solitary people on the beach, and they just looked so lonely the way I was photographing them. I was in the UK in Brighton, and they're just these kind of dark, moody, but beautiful pictures, small person, big space. And it was just like, that was good to kind of like work through my system, And I think a lot of the big emotions we feel, if we give voice to them, they're not as bad, and they're not as big, and they're not as daunting. Or they help us understand the nuance, like what kind of loneliness is, or what kind of grief, or what kind of happiness. I'm feeling joyful. I'm feeling like hop, skip, jump. I want like energy. I just feel like I want to go out in New York, and I want to, I'm thinking, I want to capture like, oh, this like excitement, raw energy. And it's like, okay, yeah, let's channel that. Let's do that. And the pictures will be full of something other than just squirrel, 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 right? And so that's what I'd say. Bring attention and then ask that inner question. Bring what's inside into that frame. And Derek, this is so fun. I appreciate you being flexible. Everyone online or watching too, thank you for being flexible. Sorry about my funny situation. I tell you guys, I did so much work to find a happy place to do this, but it worked out in the long run. And it was kind of part of the message. Of course, it's going to happen that way. So it's just.
And you know what? You still brought the Zen. I think that was an important lesson right there for everybody, that even when you're not in the Zen cabin, you can still Zen. And it's about the words. It's about the message.
Yeah. It's about what you have inside of you. I mean, I think that's ultimately when I've seen photographers go from zero to hero, and I've seen a lot of those, it's something inside. It's not their lens, it's not their cameras, it's not their bags, not their tripods. It's not how many workshops they've taken, it's not what books they've read, but it's like they have something inside of them, this fire burning within that shows up in the frames. And that's the secret sauce.
You just gave me my idea for our next conversation. We'll connect offline, but
okay.
So for all of you Orwig and Fassbender fans out there who love seeing Chris and I just vibe here, because really I think that's such an important thing that you just touched upon. It's way deeper than the gear and the settings, and I would love to dive in one day into a conversation live for the masses about really just shooting with emotion and really bringing emotion into images. So
almost part 2 of this one, I think, right?
Yeah, we'll roll right into it.
Yeah. And then I think at some point too, we need to do one on gear, because people keep asking me like, give me gear settings and give me gear recommendations, because there is an aspect of that as well. So, but Derek, this is the best. I love you, man. And everyone tuning in, and people with comments. I think David, Luke, I don't know if I'm seeing everyone else, but thank you for Sally Nelson. Thanks for just tuning in. And I'm grateful to be on this journey with you all. And we're quite lucky to have been, for whatever reason, been given this interest in photography. It's a good one. And it makes life better.
Totally. Well, a huge thank you, of course, to all the viewers out there, to Sony for hosting, and ultimately you, Chris. Thanks, man. It's always a pleasure having you on. We'll chat offline and we'll get some stuff set up. But it's all we got in the books for you guys today. Hopefully you guys are inspired, motivated, zenned out. But that's it. Another round of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. We'll catch y'all next time.